Today's session is Developing Decision Makers from Book to Field, and the presenter is Janet Rayfield, the head women's coach at the University of Illinois. Janet has been the head coach of women's soccer at the University of Illinois for 12 seasons, and her teams have reached 2 conference tournament championships and made 10 NSCAA appearances. Janet is the graduate of the University of North Carolina, where she played from 1979 to 1982, and the University of Arkansas. Janet's coaching experience is significant, and she has worked at the youth, college, and national teams levels. Her experience includes Texas Spirit Soccer Club, assistant and head coaching positions at Universities of Arkansas and Illinois, national staff coach, and is currently the technical advisor to the U.S. women's national team, just to name a few of her positions. Janet is a former president of the NSCAA and was recognized at the 2013 convention when she was presented with the Honor Award, which is the NSCAA's most prestigious distinction the association presents to any individual. Welcome, Janet, to the presentation.
Thanks, Dave. First of all, let me say welcome to everyone who's joined in on the presentation tonight. I really commend you for taking time out to further yourself as a coach and to practice and to hone your profession as a coach. I'm hoping tonight that I can share with you some of my experiences, some of the things that have made a difference in my coaching career, and give you some things to think about as you move forward in your own coaching career. You'll see the title of a book there called Developing Decision Makers. I ran into this book several years ago. It's actually a book written by a woman about a coaching philosophy of a couple of rugby coaches. And I think rugby, similar to soccer, is a sport that lends itself to players making choices and players making decisions. And I think it's one of the challenges that we face as coaches is to give our players the information that they need to make decisions on their own. And as I read this book, I was really struck with the methodology, with the philosophy, but I think more importantly with the practicality that the book provided in order to be able to take this coaching profession and turn it into something that is other than just information giving. One of the quotes in the book is, listen to the desires of your children, encourage them, and give them the autonomy to make their own decisions. And I think this is a real challenge for us as a coach. We have so much knowledge. We spend a lot of time gaining knowledge, watching games, going to conventions, going to sessions, participating in webinars. And our goal is to provide and give that information to our players. But one of the things I think that is important is as much as we give them information, we also must give them autonomy and give them the ability to make their own decisions. So I think we have to think about what is a decision maker? What are we trying to create? What is a decision-making player like? First of all, a decision-making player is one that looks. And I think this is something we certainly encourage our players to do. But I think, and I would challenge you to think about this, there's the difference between a player that looks and a player that sees. I'll use an analogy probably throughout this presentation tonight of teaching someone to drive or someone behind the wheel of a car. I think there are a lot of drivers that we would say, look, everyone's looking out their windshield, but then there's the drivers that see, and they see all of the things that are coming. They see all of their environment. And then because they see, they're able to analyze. They're able to analyze what's happening. They're able to analyze the situation that they see. They're able to process the visual information through a filter of experiences, through a filter of knowledge, through a filter of information. And then make a decision based on that, make a choice based on that, a choice that's based on, like I said, past experiences, based on information they've been given, based on the situation at the time, and they're able to make that decision. And the other thing is that decision makers are able to deal with the consequences. Decision makers take responsibility for their choices. And I think we'll look at that as we go through this presentation on how we can empower players to be a decision maker, to look, to see, to analyze, to choose, and maybe most importantly, to accept and deal with the consequences of their choices, and maybe even take that one step further and learn from those results. Because then when they look and see and analyze their past experiences, the results they gain from those experiences become as big an education as the information that we provide them as coaches. I think most of us probably have seen a prescriptive-based training that a lot of American sports certainly present themselves with a prescriptive-based sort of training environment. Here's the information. Here's what you're supposed to do in this situation, whether it's basketball or football, baseball. If there's 2 outs and a man on third, this is what you do. That's a very prescriptive-based sport. It's a prescriptive-based coaching environment. It's a prescriptive-based learning environment. What this book, Developing Decision Makers, does is really talk about an empowerment-based training, an empowerment-based philosophy. And what empowers someone, and you can read the quote there, if experts merely present knowledge to someone who's not an expert and makes decision for them, they become disempowered. Empowering means that something different. They actually are empowered to make decisions on their own. And I think that's an important piece of this philosophy. And I think we would all want that for our players. I think the question now is, how do we do that? How do we create this empowered player who can make decisions for themselves? See if I can get this to move to the next slide there.
Let me try and get it going for you. Okay, let me give me 1 second. Let's try something else. It looks like this one slide is stuck. There we go.
Okay, great. Thanks, Dave. So what's the difference between prescriptive and empowerment? You know, I think you can look down these lists, and certainly if there's parts of this slide that you have specific questions about, please feel free to type those in to Dave and we can address those. But there's a couple of things that are really important. I think that if you look to the fourth column there, fourth row there, prescriptive is I'm transferring my knowledge to an athlete. I'm transferring the knowledge I have. In this situation, here's what I would do. And empower allows the athlete to learn new things. It allows them to come to that knowledge through their own experiences. It guides athletes to determine solutions instead of providing precise answers. It trains them not to memorize what to do, but actually to grow in their ability to understand and process information. Even from a technical perspective, a prescriptive method provides technical instruction. Strike this ball with your knee over the ball and your toe pointed, and et cetera, et cetera. And empowerment actually teaches an athlete to feel their body and create the kinesthetic awareness. Where was your toe when you struck that ball? For an athlete to actually have to feel their body, where was your hip? What happened to your leg after you struck the ball? And it is providing the same information, but it's also empowering them to feel and understand their own body and creating a kinesthetic awareness. So this isn't only a tactical methodology. It can also be a technical methodology that takes it from information about what to do with their body and creates it into information about how their body should feel, and them understanding that and creating a kinesthetic awareness within the technique that you're trying to teach. So it's an important method and very subtle differences, I think, between prescriptive and empowerment. I think it's important to realize that there are moments where prescriptive is applicable to our game, where there are restart situations where players have certain roles. There may be moments in a game where there is no decision to be made, and it is prescriptive. I think we have a rule with our team. It doesn't matter whatever else is going on. Someone has to make a near post run. It's prescriptive. That's not a choice. Someone has to be at the near post run if we've got a player serving the ball from the inline. Maybe the empowerment or the decision piece is who's making it. But there's certainly times where prescriptive philosophy is applicable. But I would encourage you to think about where in your coaching philosophy you've got room for this empowerment model. What does an empowered athlete look like as opposed to a prescriptive athlete? And I think even in my own team, there are players who operate very well in this empowerment, and then there are players who have been brought up in a very prescriptive way, and they're what I call rule followers. They want to know, what do you want me to do in this situation? And it's sometimes difficult for a rule follower to exist in this empowerment world, but certainly one that as we grow and as they become more comfortable being accountable for their own decisions, and you can see in that first bullet point there, they understand that responsibility, and they take accountability, and they're able to act, they're able to make decisions and accept the consequences of their actions. There's a self-efficacy. There's an ability that they feel like they then have an ability to control the results. They no longer put the control of the game on me as a coach. They take responsibility. There's a self-efficacy. They have an ability to control results that's now based on their skill and their efforts, and that empowers them within and not from without. There's a mutual agreement on that trust between, I would say, between more than two people, between the coach and the athlete, between the athletes on the team. It becomes, empowerment happens to all of us because we all are taking accountability, all taking responsibility for our actions. An empowered athlete's more coachable because they let go. It's not their need to be controlled, need to be told what to do. You are now giving them information and providing them the ability to make decisions. Most empowered athletes, and reading through the book Developing Decision Makers, there's examples of athletes who have gone on to achieve levels of excellence they were unable to achieve prior to because they weren't empowered. There's a high level, lots of examples of athletes that really committed to achieving levels of excellence once they were empowered, and certainly willing and engaged because of that empowerment. One of the approaches in the book, and I think there'll be a subtle difference here in terms of, I think there's a real push in the United States that small-sided games is a great way to train athletes. And certainly there is this, a real marriage, I should say, between this empowerment philosophy and a small-sided game philosophy. In the book, they call it TGFU, Teaching Games for Understanding. And the key to this methodology, so I think the Teaching Games for Understanding takes the empowerment philosophy, and now the Teaching Games for Understanding becomes a empowerment methodology. It's the way in which the game is presented to the athletes that allows them to be decision makers. And the key is to design games that help players arrive at tactical understanding. But it's up to us to structure those games. And by structuring the games, you provide or limit the options that a player has so that decisions move in a way from being simple to complex. Certainly a phrase and a methodology that's talked a lot about in coaching schools. Certainly the NSCAA Academy protocol has a lot of conversations about simple to complex. And certainly the structure of these games is formatted in that way. As a player becomes more capable of making decisions, you provide them with more options and more difficult decisions to make. And by doing that, they become more empowered, they become better decision makers, and you've achieved the results that you want. And I think this is exactly right. The teaching of the art, probably with all learning, is to provide just the right amount of options. It's not too difficult. It's not too easy. It's the right amount. And here, I think, is where the car driving example is great. If I've got a young teenager who's just learning to drive, I'm going to take her into a big, wide parking lot. Not a lot of decisions. I'm going to make sure she can feel the brake and feel the gas pedal and understand how those two things operate, feel how the car drives. So I'm giving her a kinesthetic awareness that involves a vehicle, but there aren't a lot of obstacles. There's not a lot of decisions to be made. Can I start and stop? And as that young teenager learns to drive, I add more obstacles, and maybe we go to a neighborhood, and it's a long time before we get onto the highway and we're making high-speed decisions. In some ways, this philosophy is going to take a player through very similar process, and we're going to continue to complicate his or her environment and continue to give her an opportunity to make those decisions. One of the key parts about this philosophy, however, is if I'm going to do this, if I'm going to make someone into a decision maker, I've got to understand their decision-making process. So rather than providing them with answers, a lot of what I'm going to do is ask them questions. And one of the great things I liked about the book was it really took you through the process of developing yourself as a question maker. You want them to, we're going to make them decision makers. We're going to make ourselves question askers. And the quality of questions that you ask, the type of questions that you ask, the patience to get the answer, is certainly a big part of this methodology. So there are low-order questions and high-order questions. Certainly younger players and players that are developing into decision makers, low-order questions. Certainly most of the technical questions, I would say, are low-order questions. What part of the foot should you use to drive a long path? Player may say the inside of their foot. Let them strike it and see how far they can strike it. Maybe they strike it with all different parts to see what makes sense. Where were your hips? Which foot should you pass the ball in this situation? Those are sort of low-order questions. From a tactical standpoint, sometimes a low-order question is what I would call a multiple choice. In this situation, which do you think is better, option A or option B? As opposed to, what options do you see in this situation that might be the best? Higher order questions, how can we penetrate this pack defense? Where is the space, or where was the space that we could have exploited? What type of service might give us the best chance to score from this location? What is the defense giving you in terms of penetration? What is the defense giving you in terms of possession? Those sorts of questions certainly guide the player. Now, I put this picture in here because I think one of the things that's important is you're going to get a variety of reactions when you start answering these questions. I think you see the look on one girl's face is, I don't have a clue what he's talking about. I don't know. I don't have an answer. There's one who's really thinking about it, and there's one who's looking off into the distance to say, I don't really remember the situation that he's describing. So you're certainly going to get a variety of reactions to this philosophy, and something you certainly want to share with your players as you're moving forward as to sort of a change in the way that you're going to do some of these things. So let me take this from a philosophy and a methodology and make it a little bit more practical. So a 6-goal game is one of my, if I had to put into my 5 favorite games, the 6-goal game would certainly be one of them. And it can be modified in a multitude of ways. It's probably one of the reasons that I really enjoy the environment. The game changes daily. The environment is one, because of the ability to modify it, that I think can create these training games for understanding and create a great environment for that. If you look at this game, and the picture here certainly has the goals set up so that they're goals that you would pass into, but certainly the way that you score can be modified. Do I pass into the goals? Can I dribble into that goal? Certainly dribbling into the goals would be very different and create very different decisions for a player than if it was passing into the goals. The value of the goals. If the central goal is worth more than the flank goals, am I teaching my team when can we penetrate, when can we get to goal? If I make the flank goals worth more, maybe our emphasis is changing the point of attack, and so I'm teaching the player to make those sorts of decisions. If I have neutral players, can I teach the players to recognize when we've got numbers up situation and we want to attack? The size of the goals. If I'm passing through a larger goal, I may really be looking at their decision to penetrate with the pass. If I make the goal smaller, maybe we're just working on the accuracy of passing, and I've got numbers up, and I just want to see if they can make an accurate pass into those small goals. And then I'm really focusing on the kinesthetic awareness of the players in that environment when they're trying to make that pass and score into those goals. The space of the field, if it's wider than it is long, if it's shorter than it is, that can change the options, the time in which they have to make decisions, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a great game to modify, to set the game up, to get the understanding of the concept that you're trying to teach to the players.
Let me give you the control back here and see if I can give you it with the marker.
Oh,
there you go.
There you go. Now I've got a marker here. So as we go into the 6-goal game, it's important that we go into the game not just to set up a 6-goal game, but with an intent of what are we trying to teach. It's also important that you understand where your players are. What is it that I expect them to already know? So if I go back to my young driver analogy, am I still explaining where the gas pedal and the brake are and the turn signal? Or am I at a level where we have all that, and now I'm worried about now merging into traffic and those sorts of things? What should we already know? And so then what questions will we ask? And what answers could I be looking for? What high-order questions? What low-order questions? What could we be trying to achieve as we set this game up? Because I think the empowering coach, you have to train yourself differently. Because now I'm not looking at, is this player doing what I would expect them to do and trying to prescribe something. I have to decide what is it that the player is making their decision based on. Can I see what they're playing? And I think one of the things we have to do is change our eye. Rather than focusing on the player who's making the decision, watch the opponents. Rather than watching the player whose decision you're evaluating, what is it are they seeing? We have to really focus. Are there the right amount of options? Right? Am I in a position to see what they see so that I can empower them to make those decisions? The next step is, how can I train myself to ask meaningful questions? Sort of a low-level question. If I've got a player who doesn't play forward, right, how could you have seen more of the field before you had to play that ball? Rather than saying, can you change your body position? Can I get them to look at what would have helped them to do the thing that they were trying to do? What do we do if we get caught numbers down defensively? One of the great things about this game is you can play it transitionally and have another team sitting out here. So that if this player has to dribble across the goal to score, the next team coming on now kind of has a man advantage. Can I teach this team to delay until we get our numbers back? Rather than saying, hey, your number's down, can you delay this game? The question then becomes, what do we do if we get caught numbers down? The players then have to solve not only just the answer of delaying the game. Oh, we have to delay the game, coach. Okay, that's a good answer. The next question is, okay, how do we do that? How do we delay it? And allowing the players to come up with who's going to step and get pressure. Are we going to drop back and defend the 3 goals? Certainly those are important. You get a player who attacks a goal and is successful. What did you see that made you decide to attack that goal? So player may see, I was 1 versus 1 and saw the space. That's great. And now other players are starting to look for those situations that would enable them, that would empower them to make that decision. How can we move a defender from in front of that goal? How can we open up the space that we want to attack? Can we get the players to start to solve and create solutions to the problems that we present them. I presented them with a 6-goal game that's got a problem that's tailored to that specific situation that we're trying to solve. Can I get them to come up with the solutions rather than giving them solutions? I don't know about you, but I frequently get a player saying, "Coach, what should I do here?" And certainly I can give them the answer to that situation. But the opportunity or the chances for that exact scenario to present itself again to that player in that scenario, with the game score being the same, with the defensive pressure being exactly the same, with the support angles being exactly the same, is minuscule. So what I really have to do is give them the information about that environment that would give them the information they need to make the decision, rather than giving them the decision themselves. Because in that situation, certain things are going to be different, and they have to be able to evaluate those pieces of information in order to make a decision. This is another game that I love to play. We call it the seam game. The width of this field is probably about the width of the penalty box. So we're dealing with a situation where we're in the final third, and we've gotten someone along the end line, and now we're trying to create goal-scoring chances here in front of the goal. So this isn't a cross. This isn't a flank service. This is what we call a seam service. So a lot of what we're training in here is this movement in the box. How do we want to create this seam? Seam being a space between two defenders, one of which can be the goalkeeper, that we have a player running into that can then finish an opportunity. How do we create and get the ball in these seams? So it's a great goal-scoring game. It's a great finishing game, but it's also a great decision game. It's a great movement in the box, decisions. This player, we've actually made the game a little bit simpler for the player who's in the corner, the player who's gotten to the end line. We've taken the defensive pressure off of her, right? This seam, this area in here can't be defended. A defender can get to this and certainly get in a position to force the player to play the ball in certain seams, but can't get in and defend. So I've simplified the decisions here, right? So the game, in terms of understanding for this player, is all about the choices that they make in terms of finding seams here. The decisions here are a little more complicated because it's now the movement in this box that's a coordinated decision based on where my teammate is, based on where this player is serving the ball is, based on the shape and space of the defenders that are coming. But it certainly is a game that creates certain situations and certain decisions to be made by each of the players involved. Here's some of the decisions that this game creates. Even for the players in the game, ball here. When do I play that ball wide? The ball doesn't have to go wide in order to score. Another thing I like about this game, because if we're penetrating to goal and it's on to penetrate and score, that may not be the time to play the ball out wide. But I promise you, if you set this game up, almost immediately, all the players will look to play the ball into this seam because they know it's an unpressured area. They know there's a player right there that has time and space to play. And I think the assumption is they're going to think because you set the players up there and put them in the corner that they're supposed to use them. And certainly they are there to be used. But the decision of when to use them and when not to is certainly one of the first decisions. And again, I can go in and say, don't play to the person in the corner when you've got an opportunity to shoot, or I can go in and I can say, why did you choose to play the person in the corner? Great. Did you see the opportunity that you had to go to goal? And I'm changing my approach to try and empower them to make decisions. Certainly the options for the servers. And I think I talked about this. Certainly decisions that we make within this game. What's our movement in the box? How do we frame the goal? One of the great things about this game is the ball is played in here. What's this player's role? What's this player's role? Even though she's in the seam, what's this player's role as the ball is being shot or it's being played in the seam? And this is another great one. What does our transition look like? As I play this game and everyone gets forward trying to get in those seams, everyone's trying to get to the goal, and ball gets played out, goal scored on the other end. What are we going to do? How do we prevent that? Somebody's got to decide that I'm going to take care of things defensively. And again, I can make it prescriptive. Susie Q, you've got to stay back and make sure we don't. Or I can say, how are we going to prevent that? How are we going to prevent that goal? We certainly want to get numbers in the box. And they start to solve who should stay back, when they should stay back, how far they should stay back. And again, it's that the method by which we ask the question, it's the proactive way to look at the decisions that might be made, and then try to get the players to, really what you're trying to get them to do is see the things within the game that give them the information to make a decision. I'll go back to my driving a car analogy. Can you see the Mack truck that's coming in the lane next to you and the slow car in front of you? And can you see this, and can you see that? And oh, by the way, there's a stop sign 300 yards ahead of you that you're going to have to deal with as well. And now can we make a decision? I've got to get them to look at those things and then let them choose and decide. I've got to get them seeing those things. I've got to get them analyzing them. I've got to get them choosing. And then I have to get them accepting the consequences of those decisions and learning from them, so that when they filter that, the analyzation process is a filter through my past experiences and my past results. So by analyzing them and by accepting the consequences, I then get in a process where the next time my analysis, my choices are better, and I create better and better decision makers as I go through that process. Some of the meaningful questions that could be asked in this environment. Where could you run to create a channel for the ball to be played through? Right? So I'm getting the player to think about not where can I run to get the ball, but can I run somewhere that would create a channel that the server could be played for? I might ask the server, what are you seeing from that corner? Do you see your teammates? Do you see the opponent? Do you see movement? Do you see the goalkeeper? What were your choices? Did you only see one option? Did you see more than one option? How do you create more than one option? How do you choose between those options? I've got two seams. Which seam should I play in? The one that's got the most space, the one I can play the highest ball. What options am I going to create in terms of that? And what determines which choice I make between those options? Some of the meaningful questions that could be asked in that particular environment. It's a challenge for this philosophy. First of all, because it's a long-term investment for results. Prescriptive gets results quickly. Your players know exactly what you want them to do in most situations, and they can react. Developing a decision maker is time-consuming. It takes a coach's ability to discriminate between skill issue and tactical issues. I think it's a real challenge to understand how to use the questions and to do it quickly and selectively so that you don't spend your entire coaching practice talking and asking questions and asking 6 questions to get the one answer that you want. I think it's also challenging because you've got to get athletes to change their mentality so that every time you question them, they actually are looking for solutions rather than trying to justify their actions to you. So in conclusion a little bit, I'll leave you with this quote. To truly empower athletes to take responsibility for their learning, use game-specific activities, ensure they have fun, and use questioning to them to become self-aware at the elite level. It tests your knowledge, it tests your eyes, and it tests your technical which is, do you really know what you're doing? It's a challenge to have this philosophy. So in a nutshell, you've seen 2 of my favorite environments, and now you've been exposed to what I'm trying to develop as my coaching philosophy, is empowering the players to be decision makers. I really appreciate your time tonight, and certainly we'll turn things back over to Dave for closure and to see if there's any questions.
Well, thanks very much, Janet. For those of you new to the webinar series, the free webinar series comes with the opportunity to receive the Play Like Manchester United manual from our partner Soccer Coach Weekly. So over the beginning of next week, please look out for this manual to be sent to you if you haven't already received it. We will go to a couple of questions, and if you would like to send in questions at this time, please do so by sending them in through your chat box. But as a reminder, we have recorded this session, and it will be made available by video through YouTube over the course of the next 48 hours, and you'll receive an email from me. We will be taking a little hiatus from the webinars. We've done 4 this week, and now entering into the holiday period and then into NSCAA courses and the convention. We'll reconvene in the, I believe, the 21st of January with the first session of the Special Topics Diploma, coaching U6, U8, and U10. A link will be sent to you if you would like to register for that. And then the next free webinar will be Changing the Game, the Psychology of High Performance, which will be on Tuesday the 28th of January. So let's go to a couple of questions, and we've got a few coming in, Janet. And the first one from Paul, he noted that you talked a lot about being able to see things for your players, and asked if you dedicate time to visual training.
I think, well, I'm not sure Paul's question. I think one of the important things is we certainly have to be able to see what the player sees. I think there's a couple of types of visual training. Certainly, I think visual training, some people think about in terms of visualization and a player being able to see themselves in a certain environment. I think there's a lot of ways to train what we see in a game. You know, we do a lot of video. The problem with video is it doesn't come from the angle that a player sees things necessarily. So some players can't make that transcription from what they see on a video, sort of the bird's eye view, to what their view is within a game. So I think it's certainly important for a player to be able to look at things from the perspective they see them in a game and be able to take that scenario and make decisions based on it. So, you know, I could watch a video of people driving, but until I'm sitting behind the wheel of the car, I don't see things from that perspective. And I think a player has to learn to make decisions from that perspective.
Kate asked a question, at what age groups should empowerment-based training start, and what is the correct balance when working with U10 players?
Absolutely, and you know, if you read the book, it can start as early as you want. You know, I think the level of questioning, if you've got U6, U8, U10, most of the questions are certainly low-order questions, and you know, the environments are such where the options are limited, and you know, so I've got to strike a ball 15 yards. Do you think you should strike it with the inside of your foot or the outside of your foot? And it's still empowering those young players to make some decisions for themselves. I honestly don't think that there is an age that's too young to start this approach.
Okay, Peter, along the same lines with younger players, asked the question and prefaces it by saying that those of us who believe in facilitation and guided discovery of young players, how do we convince the parents who see prescriptive joystick coaching approach to be more active and engaging?
You know, I think that's a really challenging question because, you know, I think what's more challenging, I think it's not, I certainly think the parents may think it's more active and engaging, but what they really, I think, what's really a challenge is the parents see the results. And certainly a prescriptive-based approach, especially with young children, gets results quicker because the prescription is easier. Developing decision makers takes time. So I think as much as you have to explain the process to the young kids, which I think they enjoy it because they're empowered. They get to make decisions. They get to make choices. It is a fun environment for them. I have to be honest, I think it's the reason I play the sport is because I can walk between the white lines and make decisions for myself. But I think it's a matter of explaining to the parents what this process is and what you're trying to do in terms of creating a player that doesn't just follow what you want them to do, but becomes empowered. And the parents, you know, you have to guide them with what your expectations are. You may have to provide them with questions that they can ask themselves to help facilitate the learning of the young players. I certainly think educating the players on this approach is as important as educating the parents.
Let's take one more question, and certainly there's a number that we haven't asked and answered, and what I would ask Janet to do over the course of her busy schedule, particularly flying back from Florida to Illinois, is to have a look at some of the questions and provide answers, and we'll get those back to you. But Let's go to Dialary's question, and he says, do you believe that this method of approach could encourage more players to become coaches?
That's a great question. I think it certainly I think allows players to see coaching from a different perspective. I think I said one of the reasons that a lot of us play this game is because it allowed us to be decision makers, and the ability to then pass that skill set on and to pass the love of the game on to others. I certainly think players who come through this approach come through it with an excitement of what it means to be empowered within the game and to want to pass that on. I think that people that want to be educators love this approach, and if that encourages players to move on to the coaching side of things when they're done with their career because they enjoyed the process that they went through and want to pass that on to other players. Certainly, I think that's part of our job as coaches, is to give players an experience that they then would want, that the experience was so beneficial to them, so empowering to them, that they would then want to create the same thing for someone else down the line. So you would certainly hope that that's the case.